Hey, what's happening, my friends? This is your host, Rocco, again, and today we're going to be tackling the 14th, that's right, the 14th studio album by one of the greatest bands of all time, Rush. And today we're going to be discussing their 1991 album, Roll the Bones, the first album of the new decade, and a very troubled decade for Rush, I would say. This decade, they would swing between brilliant albums and like mediocre albums, kind of much more frequently than they did in the past. Not that they had many mediocre albums in the past, so there's that. But this decade was really interesting for Rush. It was just really them trying to get back into their hard rock roots. And when it succeeded, it really did succeed. But when it failed, it just kind of came across as like bland and stale and just uninspired at points. But this album here, Roll the Bones, I gotta say, I was listening to it recently to kind of prepare for the review, and I liked it a lot more than I used to. I mean, I forgot how many great songs were on this album, and I'm so happy about that because, again, if you've seen my Presto review, it was very negative, and to be honest, like I have given that album many chances, and it just still hasn't grown on me. It has so many weak tracks like Hand Over Fist, Scars, War Paint, Anagram for Mongo, Superconductor, so many songs that, if I never had to hear them again, I wouldn't care. Like, that wouldn't affect me in any way. But on Roll the Bones, there aren't any bad songs whatsoever. Sure, there's a few songs that are a bit worse than others, but here on this album, there's some really big highlights, and, the low lights aren't that low. So overall, it's a really enjoyable listen, and I'm going to be looking forward to listening to this album a lot more frequently than I used to, because it's grown on me. It's a pleasant surprise, and it's definitely a transitional album, but unlike Presto, it's a transitional album that makes sense. Again, if you've seen my press review, you'll know I'll talk about, like, sorry, I got tongue-tied for a second there. You'll know I talked about the band attempting to get back to their hard rock roots, but just failing miserably. So at the end of the day, it didn't really come across even as a transitional album, because you don't really see them transitioning to anything. You just see a band kind of stuck in this pop/synth rock kind of rut, using the guitar as the lead instrument again, but really not embracing the spirit of hard rock music, still writing the same kind of the songs in the same vein as they were on Hold Your Fire, just with more guitar than synth. So really the songwriting structure, the arrangements of the songs didn't really change much. So it wasn't really, I wouldn't even consider it a transitional album. But on this album here, it really is, because you do get an awesome mix between like the poppy kind of synth era Rush style songwriting and their future direction with their hard rock heavy album counterparts. So it really is a nice transitional mix. And the song, again, I'll delve more into this with the overall review, but the songwriting just greatly improved on this album. I mean, it's like night and day if you listen to this in Presto. It just sounds so much fresher, so much more inspired. And it has a lot of really great lyrical moments. Again, on Presto, I wasn't a huge fan of some of the lyrics on the tracks. Like, obviously, I love The Pass. I love what was that other song? Available Light was really good. Red Tide was pretty good as well. But the other songs just seemed lackluster. This album here brings back the strong songwriting from Neil Peart, and it has a lot of interesting moments, a lot of unexpected, unpredictable moments as well. So, needless to say, I really enjoyed Roll the Bones. Now, I can't really remember how I first got into this album. I believe I listened to it like a few weeks after I first heard Presto, and although I did like it a lot better than Presto, I pretty much kind of dismissed it at first as being kind of Presto Part 2, but slightly improved. And, I haven't really revisited it much since. I think I've probably heard this album about 10 times in my entire life. But this past week, just getting reacquainted with it, again, it's just an awesome experience. And I think that this album is just going to continue to grow on me. So hopefully this is going to be a positive review. Sure, it's not perfect, and, overall, it still is one of the weakest Rush albums up to this point. I'd say it's on par with Hold Your Fire. Maybe slightly better, but that's hard to say at this point. But definitely better than Presto. And, just definitely a major improvement with the band. And yeah, so that's pretty much my background with the album. Now let's just get into a little bit about the history behind it, how the band got into making this album, and the events that followed. All right, guys, so just a little bit of background information on Roll the Bones. So, Rush, after making the Presto album, they went on a short tour, which is kind of interesting and kind of suspicious that they decided to shorten the Presto tour. Kind of implies that, they weren't too confident with the album, or maybe that, after repeated listens of their finished product, they realized that they kind of missed the mark and they didn't really succeed in making the hard rock album they wanted to. So it just kind of implies that they weren't too sure how the fans would receive it. And it would make sense for them to schedule a short tour around that, being in that frame of mind. But again, that's just my opinion. That's just speculation on my part. So, it might not be true. But needless to say, man, when they were on this tour, they felt totally rejuvenated. And you could definitely tell, if you watch the videos from this tour, the band seems really energetic, really lively. And it feels like this tour was really what they needed to spark their creativity again. And they really do mention in all the interviews I've seen following the release of Roll the Bones, they really emphasized that they were really inspired when making this album and really into it, which kind of implies that they weren't into it when making Presto, or else why would they emphasize that so much? So it really just goes to show that during the Presto sessions, they probably weren't inspired, and it really does sound like a factory, mass-produced kind of product of a band just going into the studio and going through the motions. But here on Roll the Bones, you could definitely sense that spark of creativity again, that spark of just throwing caution to the wind and doing whatever the fuck they wanted. Now, I'm not trying to make it sound like this is like an experimental masterpiece, because it isn't. There are some pretty by the numbers kind of tracks on this album, but a lot more than Presto. I mean, a lot less than Presto in terms of those generic by the numbers kind of songs. So you really see that spark coming back. And apparently they had a fantastic time during the writing sessions. It was really relaxed, really, things were just coming to them. And they actually finished writing and recording this album 2 months ahead of schedule. So as I mentioned on Presto, they finished 1 month ahead of schedule, and I kind of criticized the band for that. Maybe they should have gone back and really, based on their mission statement of making a hard rock album, they should have revised their songs. But on this album, it's actually a good thing. It kind of shows that they were really inspired and really efficient working on this album. So it's a different kind of context here. But yeah, so they finished 2 months early, which is great. And they released the album in 1991, as I mentioned. And this album here was a big critical success. A big commercial success, because it went all the way to number 3 on the US charts. Okay, their last few albums were number 16, number 13, things like that. And it really felt that Rush were taking a real dip or decline in their commercial performance. Dry throat. And this album really brought them back to the top. But not only did it improve on their sales on Presto and Hold Your Fire, but we're talking number 3 on the US charts, okay? The last time they were number 3 on the US charts was on fucking Moving Pictures, okay? So this was a huge commercial success, which is great. That's freaking awesome. I love how Rush, at the most unlikely point in their career, kind of started turning it around and really gaining prominence again. So that was awesome. And I think it really gave the band the confidence to ultimately progress to the next album, Counterparts, which I think was just a fantastic album that's been growing on me over the years. A really, really strong later or kind of mid-period Rush album. And I think that Roll the Bones was the biggest stepping stone to making that album. And again, really embodies that whole transitional album moniker. Again, a few stories from the writing sessions was that Neil Peart, he was actually extremely productive, even for Neil Peart standards. The band was really surprised at how he was nailing all the tracks on the first take, which is, not surprising to me because the man was a fucking genius. But apparently, even Neil Peart was human, and it would take him more than one take usually to record the songs. But not on this album. He just came in, did his shit, and got out. And his lyrics, again, were really inspired. Now, one thing they did with this album was that they included an instrumental track. And the band were actually trying to do a few instrumental tracks since YYZ, which was the last one that they recorded on Moving Pictures. But every time Neil Peart presented them with lyrics, the song that they intended to be an instrumental ended up fitting well with those lyrics, ironically. So they never ended up getting around to producing this instrumental. But on this album, what they did was, okay, guys, we want to write an instrumental. We're going to write this instrumental before you write any of the lyrics or before you present us with any of the lyrics. So that's just what they did. They wrote the song, Where's My Thing, before hearing any of Neil Peart's lyrics and said, that's it. This is going to be the instrumental. We're not adding any lyrics to this. And they just set that aside. Which is kind of a funny way to write songs. If the lyrics work well, why not fucking include them? Why write an instrumental just for it to be an instrumental? So I don't know, the motivation behind it didn't really, didn't really sit well with me. But overall, it's a pretty good song. So the end product ended up coming out pretty well. I just found that funny how they actually like intentionally did that. All right, just a few more bits of trivia behind the album. Number one is that the album cover again was created by Hugh Syme, their longtime album art, producer, and it shows this kid kind of kicking a skull, showing the concept of what the album's about, with all these dice in the background, or what appears to be a wall made out of dice. And really, the theme of this album was chance. Neil Peart actually took a deliberate attempt at writing a thematic album again, which was the first time they'd done so since Power Windows, I believe, or arguably Hold Your Fire, but probably Power Windows. Again, not necessarily a concept album, but more of like an album with a running theme throughout it. And Roll the Bones was just an old kind of slang way of saying like throw the dice. The bones being like a metaphor for the dice. So yeah, pretty interesting album cover. Not one of my favorites. Again, it's pretty bland. It's pretty, brown. You look at it, kind of looks like shit, but it's not a horrible album cover. It's definitely better than Presto, definitely better than Hold Your Fire. So we're stepping in the right direction here, guys. Another thing I want to mention is that they recorded this album in Canada again, well, for the most part, and as opposed to the previous albums, which were just recorded all over the fucking place, like England, the Caribbean, like whatever you want to say, but yeah, this one was recorded in Canada, so just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about the making of the album. So now let's talk about the overall review. Alright guys, so I'm going to try to keep this review a little bit brief, because I realize I already mentioned a lot of these points in the introduction. I don't want to just be rehashing things over and over again. But basically, to make a long story short, this album is a major improvement over Presto for numerous reasons. 4 key reasons, I would say. The first reason here is the music itself, again, is much more hard rock oriented than Presto and, or I should say, Hold Your Fire. The guitar is back. Again, it's not a full transition to hard rock. That wouldn't come to fruition until the Counterparts album. But it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I love how the guitar tone on this album is nowhere near as thin as Presto. Sure, it's not as thick as I would like it. It's not as heavy, not as crunchy as I want it to be. But it's a step in the right direction. And the guitar playing on here, more importantly than the tone, has purpose. I mean, save for a few key moments on Presto, like the title track, sorry, not the title track, the opening track, Show Don't Tell, which has one of Alex Lifeson's greatest riffs. There really isn't much to note on that album in terms of the guitar. Like, it really serves no purpose. And that's the problem. It's the lead instrument, but really, Alex Lifeson was doing nothing interesting with the guitar on Presto. Even his solos, when they come in here and there, they're not memorable, and they really have no purpose. But on this album, although the guitar, isn't that heavy-handed guitar that we expect from Rush, well, talking about them in a hard rock context, it does serve a purpose, and there are a lot of memorable hooks, a lot of memorable solos, and just a much better performance, a much more inspired performance from Alex Lifeson. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the synthesizer, again, is minimized on this album. They use it here and there for like a few touches of color, but again, it's minimized, which is a good thing, because on Hold Your Fire, we all know they were kind of getting a little bit overboard with that cheesy 80s production in the synthesizer. But yeah, oh my god, my whole chest is showing me. But definitely improved on this album. And again, with the guitar being more of the focus on this album and having more of a purpose, that is another thing that offsets the synthesizer that comes in here and there. So awesome. Another thing is Neil Peart's lyrics. They feel much more heartfelt on this album. I love how it feels like he really poured a lot into these lyrics. And sure, Presto had the past, which we all know was a great emotional track. But this album here has so many beautiful moments. And honestly, so many beautiful moments. Bravado, Ghost of a Chance. Just some really laid-back, emotional tunes from Rush, kind of interspersed between the more up-tempo numbers, which is really good. So great job to Neil Peart getting his lyrics chops back in there and writing some of their best ballads, I would say, especially Bravado. God damn. That's another thing. This album has amazing pacing, so this will be the third reason. Presto had this huge dip in the middle of the album where it just kind of went to shit. This album here, although, as I mentioned, some songs are a little weaker than others, it's like a bunch of up and downs. Sure, the intro of the album, the first 3 tracks are probably like the highlights, but or among the highlights. But like later on in the album, there are some really strong standout moments. So you don't really get that like long stretch of barren waste like we had on Presto. So much better pacing on the album. A little more streamlined, coming in at 10 tracks. I believe Presto was about, I think, 5 to 8 minutes longer than this album. So they're, although they're still trying to fit a lot of tracks on the album because they had the CD format now and they could. It feels like they were being a little bit more selective, a little bit more in a proofreading kind of mindset when choosing the songs for this album. So that's always a bonus. Geddy Lee's vocals are great on this album, much better than Presto. On some songs on Presto, like for example Scars, Geddy Lee just sounds like a generic like 80s pop singer, to be honest. On this album, he has his soul back, he has his feel back. And although he's not hitting like those extremely epic high notes like he was back in the day, at least he's putting a lot of passion into it, which we hadn't really heard from Geddy Lee since, I'd say, Power Windows and a few moments on Hold Your Fire. So Geddy Lee's back in business. So really, the more I think about it, the more I know like how much of a noticeable improvement this album was over that. And another thing is the experimentation on this album is great. Again, it's not like an experimental masterclass or anything, but they're trying a lot of new things. They were really throwing caution to the wind. A prime example would be like the little rap interlude on the title track. Now, I'm going to get into this later, but a lot of people make too much out of that rap section. I mean, guys, reality check here. It's only like 30 to 40 seconds. Like, it's nothing. So even if you don't like rap, it shouldn't really impact the song. Plus, it just shows that the band were embracing new things and trying different things, trying to not, become stale with their sound. So I really like that. And again, coupled with a lot of the other tracks on the album, even the last track, taking some risks there, it shows that the band were really trying to push themselves a bit. So yeah, basically, to make a long story short, Roll the Bones, hands down, a way better album than Presto. And the more I think about it, the more reasons come into mind what makes it better. So that's pretty much all I got to say about it. And now let's get into the track-by-track discussions where I can really like hammer down the points on this album that I love. And I have like a few individual kind of historical backgrounds for each song that I didn't really want to give away earlier on, so I thought I'd include them on the track-by-track review.
They travel in the time of the prophets on the desert highway straight to the heart of the sun. Like lovers and heroes, I'm the restless part of everyone.
Kicking off the album, we have the absolutely powerhouse kickoff track, Dreamline. Now this song here is such a pleasant surprise, such a welcome addition to the Rush canon that every time I hear it, it's one of those tracks you forget how great it is, and it's definitely a song I really have to hear more. I mean, it's a shame that I've only heard this song about maybe 15 times in my entire life, which, it doesn't sound like a low amount, but for Rush, I've heard all their other tracks like hundreds of times. I really got to get into Dreamline more, but, this song really exemplifies everything that's fantastic about the album. It has a lot of experimentation, it takes a lot of twists and turns, and Alex Lifeson does a really great job on this song. The synthesizer is just the perfect accompaniment to the track, and we'll talk about that, but basically the synthesizer tone on this song, rather than adding cheesiness to the song, actually adds a touch of epicness and a touch of grandeur to it, which is awesome. Like, they really use the synthesizer in a fantastic way on this track, and just great lyrics as well. So let's just kind of dissect this too, talk about what makes it, specifically what makes it such a classic. And it really is a classic. This is a mid to late era Rush career highlight. So the song basically opens with Alex Lifeson doing this weird kind of like staccato guitar riff, which is pretty interesting. And you could tell it's going to lead up to something. You could tell the tension's really building up there. And right off the bat, you could see that Geddy Lee is singing with extremely low register vocals. I mean, it's almost odd hearing these vocals come out of Geddy Lee's mouth because they're so kind of, I was going to say normal, but you know what I mean? Like so subdued for Geddy Lee. And it really gives the song like this kind of mature feel to it. And right when you're getting into the groove of the track, it just absolutely explodes into like the main chorus of the track, which is absolutely one of my favorite Rush choruses. It just comes in all of a sudden. And this is the part I'm talking about where the synthesizer or the keyboard, whatever it is, really adds the epicness to the song because it really has this really ominous feel to it. But underneath the surface, it's just extremely powerful. Actually, it's a very powerful chorus. And I just love how it just comes out of nowhere, just cuts through, and really shows the band really getting that bravado back. No pun intended, but the song really shows that it's not a hard rock track, but they're really bringing back the intensity. And it's this the chorus of the song here. It isn't really powered by the guitar. I'd say it's primarily that synthesizer and bass with that pounding, thunderous bass rhythm from Geddy Lee, and the guitars kind of adds its little touches to the other parts of the song. But that chorus is just, oh, it's so chunky, it's so meaty. Honestly, one of the most unexpected and best moments on the entire album. And then before you know it, that's over. And there's a later part of the track that's actually extremely catchy, extremely poppy. The part where Geddy Lee sings, "We are young." So that part there really shows that they can incorporate those pop rock kind of sensibilities that they had on Presto and Hold Your Fire, and incorporate it into a more intense, more ominous, atmospheric kind of track. And this song sports an amazing guitar solo by Lifeson to boot. Probably his best solo since, probably something off Hold Your Fire, like maybe Mission or something. I don't even know. I don't even remember if that has a solo. Oh yeah, it does. It does have a solo. But the point is, it's a guitar solo that makes sense and really gets pretty climactic at the end. Like a lot of the guitar solos on Presto never really led anywhere. But this one here does. And I love how many times the song repeats the chorus. Usually I get a little irritated when a song repeats a chorus a little too frequently, but with one as strong and as thunderous as this song, you can repeat it till the cows come home, and I won't give a shit, because it's that good. So yeah, Dreamline is probably a 9 out of 10. I love this song, and it's definitely one of the highlights of the album. Probably, if not the best song, then maybe the second best track on the album. But there's a lot of other highlights coming up, so let's dive right in.
If we keep our pride, no paradise is lost. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost.
This album's definitely 2 for 2, guys, because the second track here, Bravado, is a phenomenal song, a phenomenal Rush song. I'm getting excited because of how great this song is, and how I hate myself for kind of not listening to this more than I should have. But yeah, Bravado was an awesome track. This is kind of like this album's version of The Pass from Presto, in the sense that this song is really about not giving up on life, really pushing forward under failure, not succumbing to depression and even suicide possibly. And it's a really deep song. It's a really heartfelt moment on the album. And again, fantastic lyrics by Neil Peart, again bringing back that emotion into his songwriting, and fantastic delivery by Geddy Lee. And the song here is just a really stripped back kind of this song here, the main focus is definitely the lyrics and the vocals and the emotion, the atmosphere, rather than the band showing off their virtuosity or anything like that. But originally, when they were writing it in the studio, they felt that the song was a little bit too busy, and they actually took the time to kind of strip it back. And it really takes a lot to do that. When a band is as musically talented as Rush, there's so much temptation to just throw everything you have into a song, make it really busy. But at the end of the day, the subject matter of the song kind of calls for a stripped back, heartfelt tune like this. So it just shows a lot of intelligence on Rush's part that they actually went back and revised the arrangement of the track to strip it back and make it more organic and more heartfelt. And I definitely think it, I haven't heard the original version of the track. I don't think anyone has, but I'm sure it definitely improved the song by doing that. And this song here has long been a favorite of Geddy Lee's. He actually said at one point that this is one of the best Rush songs they ever wrote because of how varied it is compared to the rest of the album and how heartfelt and emotional it is. And I can definitely see that. I'm not going to say that this is one of my top 20 Rush songs of all time, but it's definitely in the upper echelon. Probably the best song on the album, either this or Dreamline. I'll give them both 9 out of 10s. I'll say it right off the bat. It's a 9 out of 10. And I just love everything about it. I love how it starts off all laid back and atmospheric. And then with the verses, as the verses progresses, something always kicks in. Whether it be a bass or the drums kick into overdrive. It always has this gradual climactic build. And by the time I think the third verse comes in, we get an awesome soaring Alex Lifeson riff that just takes you away. I mean, what a great, sorry, not riff, solo, a guitar solo. And honestly, you're on cloud nine. The solo is just absolutely beautiful, absolutely soaring. And then the second half of the song is more atmospheric, really hypnotic, with Geddy Lee singing "We can pay the price, but we cannot count the cost," kind of over and over again, and just letting the music just wash over you. It's such a beautiful song. That's the key word to use with this one. Just beautiful, atmospheric, and heartfelt. So Bravado is definitely a 9 out of 10. One of the late to mid career highlights of Rush, hands down.
We go out in the world and take our chances. Fate is just the weight of circumstances. That's the way that Lady Luck dances.
And then we get to the infamous, absolutely infamous title track. You know, I've heard people say this is one of the worst Rush songs of all time. And to those people I say, I respect your opinion, but I think you're out of your fucking mind. This song is great. Again, like, the first 3 tracks on this album are fucking fantastic. And this song here in particular just really exemplifies the whole spirit Rush was in when writing this album. They were just so inspired. They wanted to try new things. And this song really does shake up the stale Rush formula of Presto, because it includes so many different things, so many things they weren't doing on Presto. First of all, it opens up with this weird kind of jazzy, it's a little cheesy, but this weird kind of jazzy synth and guitar kind of intro, but it's pretty groovy. It has this nice groove to it. And then all of a sudden this organ comes in and the band is absolutely cooking at this point. I mean, they lock into this fantastic groove powered by Geddy Lee's bass. And it's just really funky, really just out of the blue, and really joyous. They're just having a good time, and it's just so groovy. I mean, I love that. I love that, like, pre-chorus thing. Then the chorus comes in, you know, the "Why are we here? Because we're here, roll the bones." And you got some nice acoustic playing in the background. And it's just a really good, memorable kind of pop. Again, this is like the poppy part of the song, the poppy chorus with a feel-good melody and just a really uplifting chorus. And then before you know it, it locks right back into that original kind of jazzy synth and guitar intro. And followed by the pre-chorus again, the really funky section, the ah, man, I love that groove they lock into. It's just fantastic. And then before you know it, Alex Lifeson comes in with this absolutely soaring guitar solo, another really good one, another really melodic solo from Lifeson. And then the song fucking takes a complete 180, guys. Rap, okay? Now here's the thing. Geddy Lee, he was really he wasn't a huge rap fan by any means, but this was the early 90s, and rap was beginning to take form as a popular genre in music. And Geddy Lee was really, he really appreciated, like, how they, basically how rappers, what's the word I'm looking for? Their phrasing, like when how they interpret lyrics, basically, into vocals. I'm sure there's a much better way to say that, but for the love of me, I can't think of it right now. But he was just inspired by that, and he thought it would be cool to kind of try that out for one of their songs. So here we have the infamous rap section where Geddy Lee's voice is toned down to the absolute minimum, and he basically raps for a good minute or so. Earlier in the intro, I said it only lasted 30 seconds. It was actually a bit longer than that, so I apologize for the inaccuracy. And then it does reprise a little bit later. But, you know what, this part here is it's just humorous. It's just funny, and it just adds to the lighthearted nature of the track. It doesn't bother me at all. So I don't know why so many fans hate this section of the track. It's not meant to be taken seriously. But, again, if you hate rap that much, I can definitely see how that would shake up your enjoyment of this song. But for me, it's just too brief and too fleeting to really impact it for me. Sure, if the whole song was like this, it would be horrible. But it's just thrown in there as like a little comedic section, and the lyrics are hilarious, by the way. That's a fact from Gnome to Rome, boy. But then before you know it, the chorus comes back in, and the song really just gets back on track. You know, if you hated the rap section, don't worry, because the song picks up again, and really interesting. So again, Roll the Bones, to make a long story short, it's a song that shows the band just really throwing caution to the wind, trying a whole bunch of different things, and you know, I can just picture the studio right now with Geddy Lee convincing them to include rap into the song. And apparently it took a little bit of convincing. The band wasn't on board, but I'm sure they were all happy with the final result. And the final result ends up being one of the most controversial Rush songs. So I personally love it. Your opinion might differ, but for me, it's a great song. A really funky, really jazzy, feel-good moment on the album. So I'm going to give Roll the Bones a strong 8.5 out of 10. I like it that much. Okay, maybe an 8 to an 8.5 in that ballpark.
Careful with that dangerous pride. If I could only reach that dive inside. If I could only reach that dive inside. If I could only reach that dive inside. And turn it up. Face up, so you can only back down.
Alright, so the next track on the album, we got Face Up. Now, there's not much to say about this track, guys. This is basically one of those middle-of-the-road. It's just an energetic rocker on the album. Really nothing interesting about the track. Just has a pretty straightforward chorus, pretty upbeat. It's just a nice change of pace from songs like Bravado and Dreamline, things like more like serious tracks. It just brings a little bit of that playful nature into the mix of the album. That nice, like, you know, you need like a short, mindless rocker every once in a while. And this song kind of satisfies that. Again, it's kind of uninspired. I can imagine this song being on Presto. It's a little like it has like a little bit of synthesizer there. It's just, you know, the songwriting isn't as strong. But on this album here, it's just a nice change of pace. So I actually kind of like this track. I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. But again, there's nothing really to say about it. It's just a short, poppy rocker on the album. Not horrible, but not amazing. So, yeah, in the middle of the road. Probably like a 7 to 7.5. Again, in that range. You know, one day it might be a 7, one day it might be a 7.5, but I can't imagine it being higher than that. Then we get into track number 5, I believe. Where's My Thing? Part 4 of the Gangster of Boats trilogy. Now, this song here, it's, as I mentioned before, it's the instrumental of the album. And they really wrote this song with an intention of creating an instrumental, again, which they've been trying to do for many years, but never succeeded. And this song here, it's a decent instrumental. You know, I feel that this one here, and probably the one off Test for Echo, are probably like the two weakest Rush instrumentals. Not that the song's bad, but come on, guys. Look at the other Rush instrumentals out there. Okay, you got La Villa Strangiato. It's no surprise. It's my favorite Rush song of all time, so this song is nowhere near that status. Then you got YYZ, another one of my favorites. Probably in my top 20 Rush songs of all time as well. And then you got this track here. And then, of course, you have the one off Counterparts. There's a few off Snakes and Arrows, which are all, I think, are a little bit superior to this track. But this track is still pretty good. And it definitely does its part on the album. So basically this track here is it's a bass driven track. It's really funky, really groovy. And what I like about the track is that the guitar tone actually has some meat to it, some grit to it, where you actually feel like you're getting some of that hard rock throwback to like classic Rush. And I also like how it has kind of like a verse chorus kind of feel, rather than the band kind of like just showing off their virtuosity. So it's more of like a songwriter's kind of instrumental, as opposed to YYZ and La Villa, which were more of like sporadic instrumental virtuosic showcases. But it's still a really good song, really groovy, as I already mentioned. The riffs are pretty riffin', if that makes any sense. And yeah, it's a pretty, you know, not that it's like the most memorable track, but it's definitely enjoyable every time you hear it. But you know, it's not really going to stick in your mind like years down the road. So for me, you know, it's a good instrumental, but it's not great. So I'm going to give this song an 8 out of 10. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. Also, I got to mention the history behind this track in the sense of it being titled Part 4 of the Gangster of Boats trilogy. Now, that's a very tongue-in-cheek title. First of all, like, as we know, there's no other parts in this Gangster of Boats trilogy. And more importantly, if it's a trilogy, it shouldn't have a part 4, okay? So, it was a really tongue-in-cheek title. And basically, what the whole Gangster of Boats things is all about is that Neil Peart had trouble coming up with a previous album title. We don't know which album it was, but basically Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson threatened him that if they couldn't come up with a title, they'd call the album the Gangster of Boats, the Gangster of Boats, or something like that. And I guess that was like an inside joke with the band, but pretty funny title and pretty good song. So I can't complain about it. Gonna give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Playing for time, don't wanna wait for heaven, looking for love, for an angel to forgive my sins.
Alright, now getting into track number 6. So if this was a vinyl album, I guess this would be the start of side 2. It's about halfway through the album. And that's just a perfect way to summarize this track, The Big Wheel. It just kind of feels like middle of the road Rush, like something you'd hear off Presto, one of the lesser songs on Hold Your Fire. Just not a very great track. It's not horrible, and it doesn't have really offensive, overbearing synths like some of the tracks on Hold Your Fire, but it just feels like a middle of the road song. Doesn't really go anywhere. Has a pretty upbeat, average riff, but nothing special. At least it's pretty catchy. It has a pretty catchy, memorable chorus that kind of like sticks in your mind. And I kind of like some of the lyrics where they talk about an angel to give me an angel to forgive my sins, things like that. Pretty decent lyrics. But yeah, overall it has a very Hold Your Fire kind of feel. It uses a little bit more synth than some of the other songs so far. So overall, just an average song. And the thing is, near the end of the track, or at least like 75% of the way through, it sounds like it's about to break out into a solo, which would have been nice, but it ends up just being a cock tease. Like they never break into a solo, but it seems like they were building up to it with the guitar, and then it just kind of falls flat. It's also kind of lengthy, coming in at about like 5.5 minutes, I believe. So kind of like too long for the amount of ideas contained within. So yeah, Big Wheel, not a horrible track, but just middle of the road Rush. I wouldn't give it anything higher than a 7.5. So yeah, probably a 7 to 7.5 range there.
All those wasted years, all those precious wasted years, who will pay? All around that dull gray world.
Alright guys, so for the rest of the album, I have very few complaints. It's pretty high quality from here on out, and I believe a pretty strong finish to the album that started off amazingly, had a few dips in the middle, Face Up wasn't that great, The Big Wheel, but now we're getting back into the swing of things with Heresy. And this is a great song, guys. I really love the message behind this track. It's just really uplifting, really promoting forgiveness, and really moving forward in life. And it's great. And ironically, I complained about The Big Wheel having kind of like a Hold Your Fire kind of vibe to it. This one here has even more of a Hold Your Fire kind of vibe. If someone told me this song was on Hold Your Fire, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, to be honest. But it's a good example. It's a good example of what they did right in that era. And the synthesizer is pretty much kept to a minimum, but I would say like it's not overbearing. Like you could still hear it. It's still present. It's still pretty significant, but it's never overbearing. And I really love the melody behind this track. When he sings all those wasted years, all those precious wasted years. There's so much weight to Geddy Lee's vocals on there, and the lyrics really do it justice. And then it gets into that chorus. Do we have to be forgiving at last? What else can we do? Just so uplifting, so powerful. And I also love how the song kind of progresses throughout with Neil Peart's like thunderous, kind of like tribal sounding drumming going throughout. Like not really complex, but just really hard-hitting, heavy-handed drumming that sounds amazing. And it really gives the song that drive, that boost, to give the song that acceleration. So the song really does feel like it's a snowball effect as it progresses. So really great song. There's no guitar solo or anything like that, but the guitar playing throughout is pretty decent, pretty straightforward. And yeah, I really love this song, Heresy. I would give this song in the 8 to 8.5 range, somewhere along those lines. It's a really great track, and I always forget how much I like it every time I hear the song. So I got to hear more of this one, because so far from what I'm hearing, it's really good.
I don't believe in destiny or the guiding hand of fate. I don't believe in forever, but love has a mystical state. I don't believe.
Now this next track here is just phenomenal. It's a fantastic song, one of the most underrated Rush tracks, and definitely one of the best songs on the album. Right up there with Bravado, right up there with Dreamline. It's a great tune, and it's called Ghost of a Chance. And on the surface level, if you're just reading about this track, you'll notice that it's a love song. It's a love ballad written by Rush. And, that might not be a good sign depending on who you ask. A lot of people might not think of Rush as a band that would write a love song. But you know what? I would definitely fuck to this tune because it's so passionate and it's just sexy. It's a sexy song. And I don't mean that in the literal sense. I mean in the sense of it being so, like, so groovy. Like, you can really groove to this track. And it has a perfect balance of light and shade. I love how the song perfectly transitions from riff-oriented rock into this smooth, delicate kind of atmospheric section. It's extremely bluesy for Rush and extremely effective. And Alex Lifeson, he claims that this song has one of his best solos on it, or one of his favorite solos. And it's interesting because the solo on this track, although it is amazing, it's extremely bluesy and extremely out of character for Alex Lifeson. So it's kind of ironic how he considers this one of his best solos because it's just kind of out of character for the guy. So yeah, really interesting that he thinks it's one of the best. But nonetheless, I love the song. I love how it opens with this kind of snake-like groovy riff. The has this really cool, like, funky vibe to it. Really great. And Geddy Lee's vocals have this weight to them. He's not really singing high pitch. He's singing very low register tones here. So really cool. Gives it that kind of mature sound to it. And then when he says, in a shade of gray, or no, sorry, in a state of grace. I always fuck that up. Right after he says that, the song just seamlessly transitions into that sexy, mellow, kind of slow burning kind of part of the song. It's just beautiful. Again, it's just a beautiful section of the track. And just like, close your eyes, let the song just drift over you. It's great stuff, guys. In terms of the structure of the song, it's pretty straightforward. Kind of that verse, chorus kind of thing. Or, sorry, alternating between the riff component of the song and the laid back section. So, pretty straightforward structure, but really uplifting. And again, then you got that solo at the end and kind of fades out. Shortly after the solo, there's a bit more vocals, but yeah, Ghost of a Chance, fantastic song. And one more thing I should mention is that even during the verses of the track with the guitar riff kind of like goes in and out of that section. So like at one moment you're not hearing it, and there's some vocals, then it comes back in, and when it comes back in, that gives the song that boost that it really needs. So that I really love how they structured this track. So yeah, Ghost of a Chance, easily an 8.5, maybe even up to a 9. Again, I don't have that much exposure to it, so I'm kind of giving ranges, but it definitely wouldn't be lower than an 8.5, like, no question. Right, next track on the album, track number 9, we got Neurotica. Now, this song kind of grew on me, guys. At first, when I first heard this track, I thought it was kind of irritating. The chorus was kind of, a little bit cheesy for my likings. Just basically Geddy Lee repeating words that rhyme with Neurotica, including erotica, which kills me every single time. Never thought I'd hear Geddy Lee singing the words erotica in a song. It's hilarious. But it's a really good song. It's a cool riff-driven, kind of funky, guitar-driven song. It has a really cool riff, actually. Kind of a marker of what was to come on Counterparts. Pretty heavy. It's like basically a lighter version of a riff that would be on Counterparts. So, a step in the right direction, I'd say. So yeah, Neurotica is a cool song. But yeah, nowadays, I actually kind of like the chorus. I think it's pretty catchy. And I love how it just seamlessly goes into that chorus. And just the way Geddy Lee sings it is pretty good, too. Pretty poppy, but pretty interesting as well. And there's even a little bit of experimentation later in the song. You're a little bit of like electronica shit going down, which is pretty cool. It lasts like 20 seconds, and it's not like overbearing or anything, but again, it just shows Rush kind of drawing on those modern day, well, at the time, influences. So pretty cool. Oh, and there's also this ripping guitar solo that comes in. It's so good. I wish it was longer. It just comes in quick and dirty and gets out. So definitely one of the more guitar-driven tunes on the album. I really like Neurotica. So again, some people might take it or leave it depending on if the chorus bugs you or not. For me, at the moment, I'm liking it. So Neurotica, it's definitely in the I'd say it's an 8. It's probably an 8 out of 10. Maybe that's too generous, but for now, I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. And just like that, guys, we get to the end of the album with track 10, You Bet Your Life. Now, this is another weird song on the album. It's pretty good. I actually like it. It has grown on me since when I first heard it. But it's a weird track, and it might be one that you either really like or really dislike, depending on who you are. It's not that the song is, like, there's anything wrong with the song, per se. It's just that during the chorus of the track, they utilize kind of like this robotic effect on Geddy Lee's voice, and it's a really strange part of the song, unlike anything Rush has ever done. Basically, Geddy Lee just basically like rapid fire spewing out all these pronouns, and not pronouns, but descriptors of people, like, for example, evolutionist, metalist, reductionist, creationist, things like that, and it's just going on over and over again. Geddy Lee just repeating these phrases, and then over that he's singing, "You bet your life, you bet your life." I think it works pretty well. I actually enjoy that, but it is kind of weird, and the robotic voice does kind of date it to, like, early 90s. So it's kind of it's kind of like a take it or leave it section of the song. But the majority of the song, it's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty riff-based track, kind of groovy, actually. Really locks into a groove, and I really like how at the end of the song we get that robotic voice again, but with a cool, like, soaring kind of guitar solo over it. So it's a little union of the old and new aspects of Rush. So really weird track, and one that you might like or might dislike. So again, that was hard to review because it's such a weird track, but You Bet Your Life, I dig it. I think it's a good conclusion to the album, and not the heaviest track by any stretch of the imagination, but a decent conclusion. So this song here, it's probably a 7.5 out of 10. So nothing amazing, but nothing bad. And there you have it. That's not Presto, Roll the Bones. Again, a much stronger album than Presto. I was surprised by how much this album grew on me since when I first heard it back in the day. I really think that this album has a lot to offer, a lot of underrated gems, especially like Ghost of a Chance, Bravado, Dreamline, the title track I really love. Again, that's more of a take it or leave it kind of song. Even things like Heresy is really good. Neurotica. Pretty much all the songs are good. There's a few weak points here and there, but and the instrumental is kind of underwhelming compared to the other stuff. But it's a decent album, and I think one that definitely warrants a bit of revisiting and a little bit of reinvestment from the Rush community. Again, I'm not saying this is one of my favorite Rush albums. It's one of my least favorite. It's in the bottom 6, I'd say, but it's definitely not the worst, and definitely a vast improvement over Presto. So anyway, guys, in conclusion, thanks for watching as always, and I'm super excited because the next video is going to be on Counterparts, which is an album that I really fucking like. So stay tuned for that.